Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this month's IQ Academy webinar. Thank you for taking the time out to join us on our bite-sized session this month, where we will be reviewing the transitional arrangements and new requirements for water abstraction with James Dodds of Envireau Water. If you have any questions on today's session, you can send these through on the questions panel to the right of your screen. We may be slightly short on time today, so if you send these through, and we'll make sure that they're addressed in the follow-up materials after the event. We'll also have a short questionnaire that will display at the end of the session today. If you can please take the time to complete this, as your feedback helps keep these sessions relevant to your needs. Our upcoming webinar next month takes a look at data in the palm of your hand, mobile digital and 3D geology with Clive Mitchell from the British Geological Survey. You can register or find out more information on this by visiting the events page on the IQ website, and the address for that is just at the bottom of the screen now. Our branches are also running a number of events over the coming month. Details are available on the current slide. For further information, please contact your local branch secretaries, and their contact details are available on the branches page of the IQ website. And I'll now hand you over to James.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. Some of you may be aware that we ran a similar webinar back in January or February, which was in fact the inaugural webinar from the Institute. And what I want to try and do today is to update that a little bit with, as I've put there, where are we now? I am going to recap on some of the background to the regulations, because many of you may not be aware of that, and you may be new to this subject. We'll talk about what are called the transition arrangements and new activities and what that means and what we do about it. I'll talk a little bit about the application process, the transition process, which are two different things, and the new stuff hangs around evidence, some feedback from the Environment Agency on their learnings over the last 10 months or so, and we'll do some kissing, but more of that later. Normal one of those, have a quick read through that. All I can say, it's not my fault, and don't blame me if I get it wrong. The subject of abstraction licensing and quarry dewatering all began in about 1998, when the first discussions took place and the first ideas were mooted. Went a little bit quiet for a couple of years, and then it came up again and was talked about seriously both by the Environment Agency and DEFRA in the first couple of years of the 2000s, as within the context of a piece of legislation called the Water Act, which was introduced in 2003. And that act basically introduced a whole swathe of changes to an Act of Parliament called the Water Resources Act 1991. And included in the Water Act was the provision to introduce licensing for a range of exempt activities, one of which was quarry dewatering, which until that time had never needed an abstraction license. From, I think it was about April 2003 when the Water Act was enacted, the introduction of abstraction licensing for dewatering was 6 months away. It was always 6 months away, and it remains 6 months away until October last year. So that's something in the order of whatever, 14, 15 years that it was 6 months away. And that's relevant because the urgency for doing anything about it waxed and waned. And as the years rolled by and it was always 6 months away, everybody, including the Environment Agency, certainly operators and consultants and me, got bored with it and essentially forgot about it. The result of that is a lot of things that, with hindsight, should have been done weren't done. Nothing we can do about that. It is what it is, but that's why it came that way. On the 31st of October 2017, I was sitting watching the telly, and an email dropped into my phone, or whatever it was I was looking at, and it was announced that it is no longer 6 months away, it is now, and you have 2 months in order to prepare for that. That 2-month period was probably hardest for the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales, because they weren't really expecting to have only 2 months to prepare, but they did. So on the 1st of January of this year, the new regulations came into play and are operating now, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means. But in essence, quarry dewatering is a licensable activity as from the 1st of January for 2018. So it has been licensable for the last 10 months. I'm not going to go through the regulations in any detail, but there may be some of you out there that want to know where this stuff is written down. And those are the 3 key documents which you can find through the .gov.uk website if you search for those titles. The regulations, the formal regulations, are the commencement number 12 order and the transitional provisions regulations, if you like. They're the law in inverted commas, but it's important to read those within the context of that first document, that first bullet point there, which is a response to consultation document, which sets out the government's approach. And by government, I mean DEFRA approach, and in Wales, the Welsh Government approach, which are very similar but subtly different, for those of you that are interested in that level of detail. Getting on to a little bit of the nitty-gritty, in this subject, it's important to understand the types of abstraction licenses that one can obtain. And they're quite different, and they have specific purposes. I'm not going to go through the detail of when you need one license or another, but both in this discussion and in the subject area and discussions that you may have within your businesses or indeed with the Environment Agency, you will hear these types of licenses referred to, and it's important that you understand the difference between them. A full license is issued where you want to abstract more than 20 cubic meters of water a day, and you're going to do something with that water. You might turn it into concrete. You might turn it in. You might use it for mineral washing. You might use it in a wheel wash. You might use it in offices to drink or flush the loo or whatever. But in essence, you're going to do something with that water. That's called a full license. There's a couple of important things to remember about a full license. One, with that license, you get a protected right to abstract that water. And that means that the Environment Agency or Natural Resources Wales aren't allowed to issue a license to somebody else that would impact on your ability to abstract that water. You also pay an annual fee for that license, irrespective of whether you use it, based on the quantity of water that you're licensed to abstract. Not on actually how much water you abstract, but on the quantity on the license. And for large volumes of water, that runs to many thousands of pounds. For small quantities, it's hundreds of pounds. A transfer license is a different sort of license. and to introduce a techie term. It's the transfer of water from one source of supply, which is, just take that as where it comes from. So it might be from a river, for example, to another source of supply, which might be to another river, or it might be a quarry to a river or something like that. But the important thing is that there's no intervening use. So it is what it says on the tin. You're transferring water, you're getting rid of it because you don't want it in one place and you're putting it to somewhere that doesn't bother you, without any intervening use. The transfer license comes with no protected rights. Why would it? The water is essentially a nuisance for you. So if somebody derogated that ability to abstract, it would be to your advantage because you wouldn't have as much water to transfer. And the cost of the license is minimal. It's not zero, but it's not far off zero. It's hundreds of pounds, and no more than hundreds of pounds because of the way the cost is calculated. The third type of license which is available, which you may hear of, it doesn't really affect quarrying, apart from in very isolated circumstances where it might be useful, but it's referred to as a temporary license, and that allows abstraction over a period of 28 days from when the abstraction starts. So it allows from day one of the following 28 days. One of the advantages of a temporary license is that it is very quick to determine. It's determined within 28 days, and you've got 28 days to abstract. It may be useful, but it's a term that you may hear. So those are the types of licenses that we are talking about. When the regulations were introduced on the 1st of January of this year, there's essentially two situations that an operator may fall into. The first situation is that they've been dewatering historically. So they were dewatering certainly within the previous 7 years to the 1st of January of this year. The other situation that you might be in is that you hadn't started dewatering. So you started dewatering on the 3rd of January of this year, or indeed you were only dewatering a little bit historically, and that the rate of dewatering, the amount of water being pumped or the level of water in the quarry has had to be dropped this year in 2018 compared to that before. Those two situations fall into two different routes for getting your abstraction license. If you were dewatering historically, then you fall into what are referred to the transitional arrangements, and that is a slow start set of arrangements that gives you a period of time, which I'll come back to submit an application for a transfer license, and work through, allows you to continue dewatering until you have that license determined. The second situation, where you have a new activity, or sometimes referred to as a new water application, you have to apply for that now. And in essence, well, not in essence, in fact, if you are abstracting more water than you did in the previous 7 years, or indeed have started dewatering this year, you are now operating illegally, and you need to apply for a license to do that ASAP. Remember, we're now 10 months into these regulations, and time is slipping away, particularly to get any goodwill from the Environment Agency on new abstractions. Time is definitely slipping away, and you need to act on that really very quickly now, indeed. Transition arrangement timings I will come back to in just a moment. So, just going back to the application process, key element here, and I'm talking now very much about the transition arrangements. So you've been abstracting for dewatering in the 7 years prior to January of this year. So you've been dewatering for a number of years, and you're in the transition arrangements, okay, which is by far the majority of people are in that position. The DEFRA and the Welsh Government have directed the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales to take a light touch risk-based approach. And indeed, certainly the Environment Agency are taking that very much to heart. And the way in which that is being seen in practice is that the level of information and justification and explanation required to support the transition arrangements applications is much less than would normally be the case for an abstraction license application. And the risk-based approach is very much on a very simple risk analysis within the Environment Agency, which is essentially based on if you're not anywhere near a high-level protected environmental site like an SAC or a Birds Directive site or a Habitats Directive site, then given the correct information being supplied, that application will go through. And it's about getting the correct information to the Environment Agency and NRW rather than environmental impact issues for the vast majority of sites. So the transition arrangements applications opened on window opened on the 1st of January of this year, and the legal end date for that is the 31st of December 2019. The date that everybody should have in their heads for submission of applications is July next year, and that allows everybody enough time to work through the process and make sure that the Environment Agency have accepted and NRW have accepted the application as valid, which is the important piece, by the end of 2019. An application submitted late in 2019, that's for argument's sake, December, on the 12th of December 2019, while if it's valid, that's fine, but if it's not valid, then the implication of that is that by the time the Environment Agency get round to looking at it, because everybody's on Christmas holidays, is that you could potentially have to stop dewatering in January 2020. It isn't worth the risk. Just act early, and it won't be a problem. Don't push it, because that will only come down on you guys, not the Environment Agency. Once it's in and validated, then you can go back to the day job, and at some point before the end of 2022, the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales will issue a licence, and there may be discussions on what have you. So very quickly, going through the process and the data validation, you need to supply evidence of dewatering, historic dewatering, submit an application. That application will be validated by the Environment Agency or Natural Resources Wales. They may, within that process, ask for some additional information, requests for further information to help them do their job. Once that's done, they will issue a receipt for the valid application. Everybody goes to sleep. At some point then, after 2020, they may ask for a bit more information and then go through the determination process. So the key thing then is what evidence can be used to support that application. And the key piece of evidence that needs to go with the application is the volumes of water that have been abstracted during dewatering. And many of you will go, well, we haven't got any data. We haven't been collecting meter readings. We don't know what to do. There's a whole host of methods of estimating the amounts of water that have been abstracted, and the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales will accept a wide range of evidence, and I'll come back to this in a moment. But there's a few there, and there's even more there, and there is a long link there to guidance that's been issued by the Environment Agency, accepted by NRW, which you can find on the .gov.uk website. And there's the path to that there. That path does work, so I used it this morning, and I'll show you what it looks like when in a couple of slides' time. The single biggest issue at the moment is getting evidence of abstraction from sites, and that was discussed only this week with the Mineral Products Association Water Group and the Environment Agency, and we all said the same thing. It's just getting data from sites. I can't reiterate hard enough to say that you have got evidence. You have got evidence. What needs to happen on sites is just taking that bit of time to think it through, which is what I'm going to help you with now. Draw what we refer to as a site water flow process sketch, which I'll show you in a minute. And it really is easier than you think. It's just taking the time out and thinking about it. And I'm just going to quickly go through that with you now. A couple of messages from the Environment Agency on what their learnings have been over the last year. First really important thing is a couple of names for you. Sam Doling and Kate Johnson are lead officers in what's referred to as the National Permitting Service, who are the people that determine the licenses. They're the people that eventually get your forms via the normal process. They're actually based in Solihull, but you'll send your forms to Sheffield, but they will get to Sam and Kate. But more importantly than that, if you're struggling, they are there at the moment to answer questions and assist you with completing the forms and the supporting information that goes with them. I say at the moment because they're going to get busier and busier, and as they get busier, they will have less and less time to provide support. So the advantage in getting going early is you will get some help from them. The later you leave it, the less help you're going to get from the Environment Agency, because they can't obviously resource everybody all the time. And as I said earlier, the thing that the Environment Agency is seeing with applications that are coming through, and there hasn't been many, there's only been about 30 or 40 applications in total out of about 1,000 that they're expecting from the quarrying industry. The evidence, the poorest evidence is on the evidence of abstraction, the evidence supporting the abstraction quantity. This link between historic abstraction and planned abstraction is causing some issues with people. It is a little bit complicated. The Environment Agency are getting better at understanding it, essentially the answer to the questions that they will pose is about understanding essentially groundwater movements going forward. From a practical point of view, the information you need to provide the Environment Agency on this, on a modern quarry, will be link to information that will have been in a planning application and environmental statements. That's where it's all been described, and it's extracting key information out of that you need to do to assist the Environment Agency with their decision making. Do not submit full planning applications. It's just extracting key information, not overloading the Environment Agency with paper. The other thing that they find really useful is a clear, simple site water management flow diagram, which I will show you. And that is what will help you pull the right information together. And there is one. This is one, as they say, I prepared earlier. And what I'm trying to show here is that you can make it really simple. You don't need to go to head office to produce CAD drawings. The starting point is a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, and a pencil. And what we're trying to show to the Environment Agency is that we understand where water's coming from and where it's going to and what is linked to what. Okay, and on this diagram, what I'm showing is I have some pumped transfers of water, I have some gravity transfers of water, I've got a circle going round between the process plant or the washing plant and some lagoons. I've got an eventual discharge to a river. And I've also got, on this example, a borehole water supply that's going to a concrete plant and a wheel wash, which is separate from everything else. That figure helps the Environment Agency enormously in working out what sort of licenses you need. And indeed, if you're working with consultants, they will be able to take that and tell you what sort of licenses you need in that particular example. Every quarry is different, linkages are different, and therefore that figure will look different for every quarry that you come across. But hopefully you can see the point that I'm making, which is you can keep it simple. That's the first KISS point, by the way. The second KISS point is the evidence base for the quantities of water. I gave you that link earlier. That's the table it links to, and you can see that there's lots of different ways to think about the quantities of water that you've abstracted. Obviously, if you've got meters and you've been recording meter readings, then great, that's all you need. I haven't yet found a quarry that has been doing that in any particularly consistent way, but that's maybe just me. But there are lots of other ways of doing it. And if in the final analysis, you know that you've got a pump and you can find the name or the make and model of that pump, then we can find the duty curves for that on the internet. And old Mick that switches the pump on and off knows that he switches it off on a Monday morning and switches it off on a Friday afternoon before he goes home. From that, we can then start building up a picture of the quantities of water that have been abstracted. So don't panic. You must have data because you know whether there's a pump there or there isn't, and you can work through in a logical way when pumps are switched on or off. And from that, you can estimate quantities of water in a consistent way. And all the Environment Agency are looking for is an evidence base that has logic attached to it and some numbers attached to it, not just bland statements with nothing to back it up. Believe me, it's true. So that's the second KISS from me. Just a couple of notes, and I've just about finished. First of all abstract, as far as you're concerned within the minerals industry, other than one point, which is my second bullet there, all abstraction of water that's more than 20 cubic meters a day requires an abstraction license of one type or another. Okay, you may have abstractions of water or uses of water on your quarry that you have no license for. There's lots of reasons for that. the Environment Agency recognise there's lots of reasons for that, and the biggest one is interpretation of law that's kind of changed, but you need a license now. There's virtually no exemptions from licensing. So if you haven't got a license, you need one, is about the best way to think about it. The only situation that is a little bit different is if you think there's no groundwater entering your quarry. If the only water entering your quarry is falling out of the air and not travelling through the ground, then you don't need a transfer license. But if you think you fall into that bucket, then you really should seek relevant advice to make sure you don't end up at some point in the future be in front of the beak, because that's where you would end up if you get that wrong. Okay. The take-home message from this presentation is that message: it's act now. Time is now running out. That's a clock that we produced back in September. We're not in September now, we're now in November, or very nearly in November. So we've already 2 months on that clock, and you really want to be looking at your deadline as being June next year. The time to do this work is this winter, in my opinion. It's a winter job. Things are a little bit quieter. By the time you get into the spring next year, things will be getting busier. It'll drop down the priority list again. They're into winter. You need to get on with it. The phrase that's often used by me is JFDI, and I'll let you work out what that might mean. Final slide. 2 sets of application forms. The Environment Agency application forms are on that link. Natural Resources Wales application forms are on that link. The sets of application forms are different. Make sure you use the right set of application forms for the right jurisdiction. This stuff doesn't affect Scotland. If anybody's listening from Scotland, Scotland is done in a totally different way. I do apologise, I'm a minute and a half over, but if anybody wants to get in touch, you've got those details now. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, James, and thank you to all of you who took the time out to join us today. As with the previous sessions, we'll be making the recording and slides available to you later next week, and also we'll include those URLs that James mentioned during the session today. If you do have a chance, please provide your feedback of today's session on the questionnaire that will be being displayed shortly. Thank you again for joining us, and don't forget to register on our upcoming webinars on the IQ website. Thank you.